guys, this is Taylor with SoCal EMS Training Institute. In this video, we're going to be talking about bleeding control and management. So obviously, if someone is bleeding when you arrive on scene, that's our first priority, that we want to stop that bleeding as soon as possible. So for example, patient cut his arm on a skill saw, working in a construction site, and you're going to see a difference between arterial bleeding versus venous bleeding versus just like a regular scratch or a little small superficial cut. If a patient at all nicks or cuts a arterial artery, that's going to be some bright blood that's going to be squirting, and there's going to be a lot of blood. So you want to stop that. They should hopefully be stopping it themselves with direct pressure. If you don't have time to grab a quick 4x4 or some type of gauze, then you yourself want to, if they're not already, grab direct pressure and hold as tight as you can. If you're just by yourself and now you are stuck, you can potentially have the patient do that if you can, or if you need to yourself, grab direct pressure. I always like to start off with 4x4s and put 4x4s on the wound itself right away. Now, if the bleeding is a lot, there's a lot of bleeding, 4x4s isn't going to do too much. If the bleeding stops by 4x4s, great. Then you're going to continue to keep on putting 4x4s on. You're going to use your Kerlix, your Coban. You're going to wrap that up if that's just not a significant type of bleed. But usually, if it's an arterial bleed, the moment that we put 4x4s on it, it's just going to soak right up into it, and it's not going to really help it stop it. So that's when we're going to use our tourniquet, and we're going to place it on the patient. So patient, can you hold that there for me? You're going to take your tourniquet. This is called a cat tourniquet. And what we're going to do is we're going to put this on the patient. So above his arm, we never want to put it over a joint. So if his injury was right here, we wanted to put it around 2 to 4 inches above the bleeding. Right, that would be the elbow. So you don't want to put it on the elbow, so we put it right above the elbow. What we're going to do is we're going to tighten this down. It's going to cinch really, really tight. You're going to tell the patient, this is going to hurt, it's not going to feel good. And you want to tighten this thing as hard as you can. So this is Velcro, so I'm going to tighten this really, really hard at first. And right here is your spindle. This is what's actually going to make it even tighter and stop the bleeding if it's an artery. So you're going to actually turn it and twist it until a couple things. One, until the bleeding stops, or two, when you don't feel a pulse. If you don't feel a radial pulse down here, well, that means that there should be a blockage, and you should have stopped the arterial bleed. So I'm going to tighten that down. Once I tighten it down, I'm going to put the spindle inside this little locking mechanism. That way it doesn't just spin off. And then I'm going to strap it even more. And a couple things I can do. To make sure that that doesn't come apart, I can tape it or secure it even better with like a Coban or Kerlix. I'm going to mark the time that I put it on him. You can either do that on the tourniquet, or you can even do it on his forehead, or just make sure you don't forget that time that you put it on him. And then you're going to reassess and make sure that he stopped bleeding. So if he stopped bleeding, you want to leave this 4x4s in place, because the moment I take that off, all that blood that's been clotting is ripped off a part of his arm, and now he might continue to bleed. So leave that clotted, dirty, bloody 4x4s on his wound. And then you're going to start dressing the bandage, dressing the wound. So from here, you can start wrapping it up with Kerlix. A little trick what you can do to make it a little bit more tighter is when you have a Kerlix, you can twist this Kerlix at the point to where it right over the wound, and then continue to wrap it. That way it just kind of compresses it even more, and you can do the same thing, keep on doing that. And you're going to continue to wrap that up and dress it appropriately. Throughout the call, when you're transporting the patient to the hospital, you want to make sure that the bleeding hasn't continued. So if you do see a bunch of blood start dripping out again, well, either your tourniquet got loose, or they might need a new tourniquet. So at any point where one tourniquet doesn't work, then you want to take another tourniquet and put it above that tourniquet. So with this one, if that wasn't working, I would actually put it high and tight all the way up above his arm. On the upper part of his arm, and try to crank that thing as hard as I can to stop the bleeding even more. So that's a little bit about bleeding control and how to use a tourniquet. Do not delay using a tourniquet, it's going to save someone's life. So that's it. Thanks.